Welcome to Nightmares, where horror meets your dreamscape. Here, we share spine-tingling stories that blend the thrill of horror with the calm of sleep, perfect for those who love a little fright before drifting off. If you enjoy these chilling tales, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll know exactly when a new nightmare has been uploaded. And before you fall asleep, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Let's see how far our scary tales have traveled. Sleep tight, if you dare. Now our story begins. In the sweltering embrace of a Detroit summer evening, Larry McDonald ambled through the deserted streets. His worn-out baseball cap shielded his sweat-drenched forehead, and the fading light cast elongated shadows that danced alongside him. Larry, a middle-aged man with a penchant for old rock music, had spent the day rummaging through the dusty aisles of a second-hand record store. His prize of the day, a rare vinyl of Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti, was tucked safely under his arm. The city's usual buzz had been replaced by an eerie silence that made the sticky air feel heavier. The buildings seemed taller. The first indication of trouble was the distant sound of sirens, a pattern of chaos that grew louder with each step Larry took toward home. He quickened his pace, the anticipation of a cold beer and the comfort of his couch propelling him forward. As he approached the corner of 8 Mile Road and Woodward Avenue, Larry saw a commotion up ahead. A group of people, their faces twisted in rage, chased a terrified young woman. They moved with a disturbing erratic gait, as if their bodies were controlled by some malevolent force. Larry froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. The woman's screams pierced the quietude, and suddenly one of the pursuers lunged at her, biting down with a ferocity that was almost inhuman. She crumpled to the ground, and in a heartbeat, the others descended upon her. Panic bubbled in Larry's chest. He knew he had to get out of there fast. He turned to retreat, only to find himself face to face with a man whose eyes were glazed over with a sickly film. The man's teeth were bared, and his breath reeked of rotten meat. Without warning, he lunged. Larry's survival instincts kicked in, and he swung the vinyl album like a frisbee, catching the attacker's head with a resounding crack. The man staggered back, allowing Larry to sprint away. The chilling realization dawned on him that this was no ordinary assault. Something was infecting the people of Detroit, turning them into mindless predators. As he ran, Larry's thoughts raced. He had to warn someone, had to get help. He fumbled with his phone, trying to dial 911, but the call dropped out. He glanced over his shoulder to find the streets now filled with these infected creatures, staggering toward him. The sirens grew closer, but they brought no comfort, only a sense of dread. The National Guard must have been called in to contain the outbreak. He ducked into an alley, his breath ragged and the vinyl clutched tightly to his chest. The shadows grew darker, and the alley grew narrower until it was barely wide enough to fit his shoulders. Larry heard the shuffling of feet behind him, the guttural growls of the pursuers growing louder. His heart hammered in his ears as he stumbled upon a metal gate leading to a backyard. With a desperate heave, he flung it open and slipped through, the clang of metal reverberating through the alley like a gunshot. The backyard was a small, fenced-in oasis, the scent of blooming lilacs overpowered by the stench of decay. A dilapidated house loomed over him, its windows boarded up, a silent sentinel to the horror unfolding outside. Larry's eyes scanned the area for any sign of refuge, spotting a tool shed with a rusted lock. He sprinted to it, the adrenaline coursing through his veins, giving him the strength to smash the lock with a nearby brick. The shed door creaked open, revealing a dark, cramped space filled with cobwebs and forgotten garden tools. He stepped inside, the door scraping shut behind him, and crouched down, panting. The thud of the creature's footsteps grew closer, their snarling a chorus of hunger echoing through the alley. Larry pressed his back against the damp wood, his heart thundering in his chest. The shed's darkness enveloped him, a stark contrast to the bright summer evening just outside. He could feel their presence, almost taste their rabid breaths as they prowled the perimeter of the fence, seeking their prey. The sirens grew to a fever pitch, the National Guard's arrival imminent. He knew he had to move before the area was locked down. Forcing his breaths to steady, Larry took stock of the shed's contents. His eyes fell upon a pair of rusty garden shears. The metal was dull, but the points looked sharp enough to serve as a weapon. He gripped the worn handle tightly, feeling the rough edges dig into his palm. It was a poor defense against the horrors outside, but it was all he had. The snarling grew more intense, the frenzied mob seemingly aware of his hiding place. Larry could almost feel their hunger seeping through the cracks in the wood. He knew he had to get to the suburbs, where hopefully his family and friends had escaped the madness. If he didn't, he might be trapped in the city, surrounded by these infected monsters. Summoning his courage, Larry peeked through a crack in the shed door. The alley was a sea of flailing limbs and snapping jaws, the infected stumbling over each other in a frenetic dance of bloodlust. The sirens had reached a crescendo, the flashing lights of military vehicles casting a strobe-like glow on the chaotic scene. The National Guard was setting up barricades, sealing off the city. His window of escape was rapidly closing. With a deep breath, Larry pushed open the shed door a fraction. The creature's attention swiveled to him like a horde of sharks scenting blood. He stepped out, the garden shears held before him like a cross against vampires. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood, the heat of the evening trapping the smell in a suffocating embrace. Larry's skin crawled as the creature's eyes locked onto him, their pupils dilated with hunger. He bolted, sprinting through the alley, the thunder of his heart drowning out the sirens. The creatures followed, their shuffling footsteps growing louder, more insistent. As Larry emerged onto Woodward Avenue, he saw the National Guard setting up a barricade a few blocks away. The soldiers were in full gear, their faces grim as they fired warning shots into the air. Larry's hopes soared for a brief moment before plummeting. The infected had spotted the military presence and were converging on it, a tidal wave of chaos and violence. The soldiers struggled to hold the line, their rifles firing in controlled bursts. The sound of gunfire melded with the anguished cries of the infected, creating a symphony of horror that pierced the night. He knew he had to act fast. Darting through the shadows, Larry weaved through the outskirts of the chaos, using the distraction to his advantage. Each step brought him closer to the barricade, but also closer to the ravenous mob. The heat from their bodies washed over him, the stench of decay a constant reminder of what they had become. His mind raced with the possibility of infection. A single bite could mean a fate worse than death. As he approached the barricade, a soldier's gaze fell on him. The young man's eyes widened in a mix of horror and fear before he called out, "Sir, stop! Don't come any closer." Larry paused, the garden shears still clutched in his hand, his chest heaving. He knew he looked suspicious, but he had to get through. He shouted back, "I'm not one of them. I need help." The soldier took a step closer, his rifle pointed at Larry's chest. "Drop your weapon and put your hands up." Larry's grip on the shears tightened, but he knew he had no choice. He slowly bent down and placed them on the ground, raising his hands in the air. The infected were now only a few houses away, their moans a crescendo of terror. "Please let me through. I'm not infected." Larry begged, his voice cracking with desperation. The soldier looked at him with a mix of doubt and empathy, sweat glistening on his forehead. "We have orders to shoot on sight," he replied, his voice strained, "but I'll radio for a medical team to check you out." The sound of the approaching mob grew louder, their groans echoing off the buildings like a macabre chant. Larry's eyes darted from the soldier to the barricade and back, his mind racing. "There's no time for that," he yelled. "They're almost here. You have to trust me." The soldier's expression shifted, his eyes flicking between the horde and Larry. The line was holding for now, but the creature's numbers were overwhelming. He took a deep breath and made a split-second decision. "Go! Run for it. We'll cover your retreat." With a nod of gratitude, Larry took off, sprinting towards the barricade. The soldier's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Open the gate! Incoming civilian!" Bullets whizzed by as the National Guard laid down covering fire, dropping several infected that had breached the alley's mouth. Larry felt the heat of their passing, a stark reminder of his precarious situation. The gate to the suburbs beckoned, a symbol of safety just within his grasp. As he approached, the gate began to swing open. The soldiers' faces were etched with urgency, their eyes never leaving the horde that grew ever closer. Larry's legs burned with the effort, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The gap between him and the barricade grew smaller with every step, hope swelling in his chest. The first infected creature broke through the alley, its eyes locking onto him with a feral intensity. Larry pushed himself harder, his legs feeling like lead. The soldier beside the gate leveled his rifle, firing into the creature's chest. It stumbled but did not fall. Another round to the head dropped it like a stone. "Hurry!" the soldier yelled, his voice strained. The barricade was now just a few feet away. Larry could see the sweat on the soldiers' faces, their fear palpable despite their discipline. He threw himself through the opening, the gate slamming shut behind him with a thunderous clang. The soldiers quickly secured it, the metal bars groaning under the weight of the infected pressing against it. The creature's clawing hands and snapping teeth filled the air with a cacophony of rage. Panting heavily, Larry looked around. The suburbs were eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the chaos trapped on the other side of the barricade. He was safe for now, but the horror of the city was a stark reminder of what awaited him if he didn't find refuge. He stumbled away from the gate, the garden shears forgotten on the ground. The National Guard's compound was a few miles away, a bastion of safety in the spreading pandemonium. The suburban streets stretched out like a ghost town, the occasional flicker of candlelight in a window hinting at the terrified residents huddled inside. Larry's mind raced as he tried to formulate a plan. His first priority was to find his family, but without a working phone or any news, he had no idea where to start. The distant rumble of military vehicles grew louder, signaling that the quarantine was being enforced with a heavy hand.